of events. Oops, I think I started too soon. So let's start again. Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in. I'm Christina Nosti, Director of Events and Marketing at Books and Books in Miami, Florida. And tonight, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to an evening with Isabel Allende to celebrate the publication of Violeta, published by our friends at Random House. Tonight's event would not be possible without the partnership of Miami Book Fair, as well as some of the best independent bookstores across the nation, which I would quickly like to acknowledge. Anderson's in Chicago, Book Passage in San Francisco, Boswell Book Company in Milwaukee, Boulder Bookstore in Colorado, Changing Hands in Tempe and Phoenix, Gibson's Bookstore in Concord, Left Bank Books in St. Louis, Northshire in Manchester, Politics and Prose in Washington, D.C., R.J. Julia in Madison, Connecticut, Square Books in Oxford, Tattered Cover in Denver, The King's English in Salt Lake City, University Bookstore in Seattle, Village Books in Bellingham, and Warwick's in La Jolla, California. Thank you for your partnership. Tonight, we all come together to hear from a woman who means a great deal to all of us. Isabel Allende won worldwide acclaim in 1982 with the publication of her first novel, The House of the Spirits. Since then, she has authored 26 best-selling and critically acclaimed books, which have been translated into more than 42 languages. In addition to her work as a writer, Allende devotes much of her time to human rights causes. In 1996, following the death of her daughter, Paula Frias, she established a charitable foundation in her honor, which has awarded grants to more than 100 nonprofits worldwide on behalf of women and girls. In 2014, President Barack Obama awarded Allende the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor. And in 2018, she received the Medal for Distinguished Contribution to American Letters from the National Book Foundation. She has also received Penn Center's USA's Lifetime Achievement Award. To moderate this evening's conversation, we're joined by Victoria Alonso, a native of Buenos Aires who serves as president of production for Marvel Studios and as an executive producer of all Marvel films, which have amassed over 23 billion worldwide. Alonso has become an important voice in Hollywood as a producer, a Latina, and a senior female executive. She was the first woman to be presented with the Harold Lloyd Award from the Advanced Imaging Society, which is given to a filmmaker who has created a body of work and specific achievements in 3D that advance the motion picture art form. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guest to the virtual stage.
Well, hello, hello, hello. Isabel, how are you?
Hola, Victoria, qué honor. I have to say to the audience that this is the most important Latino woman in Hollywood. I am honored, really.
Well, I tell you what, the honor is truly mine. You have been in my life for many years, although you don't know it, because I think that's one of the things that it happens to a writer, to many people, because 75 million people have read your books.
Where are the, hey, Victoria, where are the $75 million? I haven't seen them.
I tell you what, maybe we need to figure out that agent relationship there.
Yeah, I know.
And see what's happening. But when you think about, first of all, we should tell the people why two Latinas and talking in English, because that will be my first question. Why are we talking in English? Tell the people what we're doing today here.
Okay, we are connecting with lots and lots of people in an English-speaking country. And I am sure that most of the Latino people who are listening to us can understand what we are saying.
Beautiful. So I just want to make sure that if anyone wants to do this again in Spanish, llámame, lo hacemos, no hay problema. There you go, lo hacemos. I was thinking how, first of all, the gift that you're giving me to be talking to you.
Thank you.
And the gift that I think to every single person, whether it was English speaking or Spanish speaking, that I told, I am about to talk to Isabel Allende. Oh my God, are you kidding me? What? I've read her for years. She's been in my life for 40 years. She was, and it is one of those massive moments in lives. Do you even know that that's what's happening to people? Do you even understand that?
Look, Victoria, I am 80 years old. In 80 years, you can do a lot. And I have been writing for 40. So maybe the kind of people that you meet have heard about me because I've been out there for a very long time. But I know, of course, I count the people who like me and they write to me and they're so kind to me. But I never forget that that's a captive audience. Yes. Because the people that come to me are the people who have read my books and like them. There's a lot of people who detest me and they don't come to me. I have never had anybody in my face saying something ugly. So I'm very lucky. But that doesn't mean they are not there. You know, it's like the psychiatrist who thinks that everybody's crazy because the only people he sees are crazy people. Yeah. So please don't think that everybody likes me. It's just a captive audience.
Well, here's the thing though, and this is a question that I think is worth talking about. A lot of the people that read you are women. And why do you think that men either don't or less men read you than women?
Well, several reasons. First, more women than men read fiction. My readers are between 22 and 55 years old, mostly women, but they are also young men because they study me in universities or high schools, or because their mothers or girlfriends sort of pushed the book and they had to read it. I don't get old men. That's my problem.
Really?
Well, it isn't a problem.
I was going to say, this has never been a problem for you. You're in your third marriage.
Well, yeah, not because I'm a writer. Maybe because of something. Maybe because of something else. I don't know.
We're going to talk about that. I want to ask you, because when you and I chatted prior to this, we said that for me, what was important, as it was for you, thank God, is to talk about love. Is to talk about love in general, love in your book, in Violeta, which is right here. For all of you that would like to go buy it, please go buy it. It's an amazing book. And it goes the span of 100 years. And I'd love to talk about love in your life, love in her life, and the parallels between both of you ladies' lives and how that has impacted you or affected you throughout the years.
Well, first I have to say that in my latest, I would say 3 or 4 books, I have old couples falling in love. That's because I got to be old and I realized that I'm still romantic and passionate and I still want a companion. Unfortunately, I am heterosexual, so it's not easy to find a man that is still healthy and can talk in full sentences. Not easy. But women are way better kept in old age. Yeah. In any case, Violeta has a very long life, 100 years. She's born in one pandemic in 1920 and dies in 2020. Born in 1920. And in that 100 years, a century, of course, many things happened to her and many loves and love affairs happened to her. She marries very young, as women did then, to the husband that was supposed to be forever, the father of her children, very boring. And then one day, I would say fortunate day, someone falls from the sky, and really falls from the sky because he's a pilot. And he comes in a private plane and lands in the lake. And he's handsome, debonair, sings, dances. He's a war hero. He's legendary. He's a pilot, for God's sake. I mean, who would not fall for a guy like that? And it is love, passion and lust at first sight, and that changes her life completely. This man, who becomes the father of her children, they never marry, doesn't treat her very well, actually treats her very badly. And this is an independent, strong woman who can support herself and her children, and who supports him in many instances during their very long relationship, and puts up with the abuse. And then there was a point when I had to wonder, why? Why does she do that? Why is she still there with that guy? And I think she didn't see it because she was blinded by passion, and she was amazed by how extraordinary this man was, until later in her life when she can see the abuse in other people, in other women, and then she can compare and say, wow, I went through this too. And then she reacts. And then at the end of her life, she finds the kind of love that I have now, which is a good companion to share a life with a sense of humor, with tolerance, with a lot of baggage that you carry with you. But you sort of establish a dance in which you don't step on each other's toes and try to blend in these lives that are very different. The guy comes from Norway, and they somehow manage to have a life. And that is what has happened to me. So when I look at Violeta, I didn't intend it this way, Victoria. I promise I didn't, but things happen. People have compared my own life with hers. It wasn't my intention. I was thinking of my mother more than of myself. But in romance and in passion, I think we travel the same road, she and I.
Now, what would happen if a pilot just will drop off the sky one of these days over in San Francisco?
I would leave Roger in 2 minutes. But it would have to be a First World War pilot, a very ancient pilot.
Never know. There's a lot of things that happen lately. He doesn't have to be in a warcraft. He could be, parachuting down. You never know. That's very funny. I think one of the greatest things about you, when I did so much research, because I knew your work, but I didn't know you. And people that know you, that we know, we have friends in common, always said, she is a song of life.
Nice.
And what I hear in those words is you. And I don't know if you see yourself that way, but
no, but I do see myself as very energetic. I am healthy, and I've always been full of ideas. What about you, Victoria? I'm sure it's the same with you. Your head is boiling with stuff, isn't it? All the time. And your dreams, you must be dreaming like crazy, all kinds of stuff.
I don't sleep a lot. I don't know if you do sleep a lot.
It's this churning thing inside, which people call creative force. And I think if I would have been born in another time, I would be in an asylum. Really?
I would probably be your neighbor next door.
We would both be institutionalized.
We will be fighting the nurses not to get the drugs, because we will be trying to have as much fun. I think that many people that, I keep on reading the chats, what they're saying, they all want to be you when they grow older. So I say, watch out, world, because God knows, first of all, I think we need more of you, but it's a beautiful thing when you can inspire people to be a little bit like you are. Do you know that you inspire people?
No, but I know that if I tell my story, I connect to people, because everybody has the same desires, the same fears. Our lives are similar in many ways, and I feel connected. For example, right now that I have this age that I have, of which I'm really proud, really proud. I've been saying that I'm 80 for the last 3 or 4 years.
But you're not 80 yet.
No, I'm not, but I will be very soon. I mean, I will be very soon. If this inspires people to feel that you can get old and still be in the world, still be curious and with joy and with a desire to grab life and swallow it, I think that's great, that if that inspires other people, do not stay there playing bingo, for God's sake, don't.
And what do you think? I have so many questions. We're going to be here all night. But what do you think? Because when you say something like that, I think it's inspiring for some people. But what is it about you that doesn't stay playing bingo every weekend and has this thing that I gotta go, I gotta write, I gotta come on, Roger, we gotta do thing, and I have this to, I have a book to do, I have a conference to give, I'm going over here to talk to the people at the University of so and so, because you do that all the time. You have this passion for life. What do you think is it just that this is the way that you are born, you were made this way? Because I know that you said in the past in your family there's a lot of depression, so it's not like,
yeah.
And so you didn't have that as a young adult or a young child, so this is you.
Well, I have been sad, very sad, many times.
Yeah.
But I have not been depressed. Depression is paralyzing. It's like a spiral downward that you can't get out. I haven't been in that state. I'm very grateful for that. But the question that you are asking about, how do I do it? I can turn it around, Victoria. How do you do it? Because this happens at any age and you have to train. You are very young. You could be my daughter. And actually you are younger than my son, for God's sake. So
listen, I will call you mama anytime. Come over, yeah. Mama, I'll come and cook you. I'll cook you for your birthday.
Yeah, but you see, you are training for an old age full of passion and interest and curiosity and relationships and to be in the world. It doesn't happen because you get old. You don't get any wiser because you get old. You train for whatever kind of old age or old person you want to be.
I truly agree. One of the things that we were talking about a little earlier, there's a quote by Terry Pratchett that she says, the meaning of life is to find your gift, and to find your gift is happiness. So
I believe that's true.
My question for you, my darling Isabel, what is your gift?
And storytelling. Storytelling is my only gift. I can't sing. You can sing, Victoria, but I can't. The only thing I can do, I can't even cook, is tell a story.
Storytelling. You know, storytelling is a weapon.
I don't know if it's a weapon, but to me, it gives purpose to my life. It entertains me. It connects me to people. It's been a wonderful gift. Wonderful. And also a gift that doesn't age. Yeah. I can, for as long as I'm not demented or with Alzheimer's, I can tell stories.
The beautiful thing about not only that you can tell stories is that you have a point of view. And I think that what people confuse sometimes is an opinion with a point of view.
I will explain. I don't get it.
You can just have an opinion on, I don't like red, but you can have a point of view in how red could be affected by the light and create something else. It could evoke a feeling in a point of view. Do you think that, did you always have a point of view? Because you very clearly in your books have a point of view about many different things, and whether it's politics, love, the pursuit of happiness, heartbreak, all the things that are quite universal for us to actually relate to your stories. Did you always have that?
You know, when I look back, I don't think that I have changed much in my life. There have been stages. And there has been, well, I've been displaced so often. I have had to start from scratch again, reinvent myself many times. I have had love affairs and marriages and children and grandchildren and all that. But there is a thread that I see in myself always. And it's the same demons, the same angels, the same obsessions, the same things I care for since I was a child. That has not changed. So I could give you a short list of those things that appear constantly in my books and that are constant themes also in my life. And in a way, that consistency has carried me for 80 years.
Mm.
And I think that it's possible that that is reflected in the books, and you can see it in between the lines. And people who have the same values or obsessions or demons connect to me easily, because all that is already in them.
Mm.
You know, I get a lot of emails of women especially who tell me, after I read this book, it was a revelation for me. You changed my life. I didn't change anything. I just put in words what was already in her. And she saw it suddenly because it was there in a story and she could relate to it. But I cannot convince anybody of something that is not already in a seed inside.
But I think that your writing sometimes allows people to stay quiet and to find answers through you that maybe they had it all the time, but they're able to stay quiet and find it. That is your gift, to give them that, which is a beautiful thing. I want to talk about heroism. You know, I make movies about superheroes, as you know.
Yeah. By the way, I love some of your movies, especially the Black Panther. Loved it.
Bless you. Thank you. It was a great film to make and to talk about, by the way. You have been quite heroic in your life. And one of the things that, if people have not seen the HBO show that they did 3 episodes in your life called Isabel. You rescued people, risking your life. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Look, it was the time of the military coup in Chile, the repression that followed the military coup. And we had no experience in repression and dictatorship. We didn't know what was going on. Everything was censored. So it was just rumors about what was going on. But I don't think that many people were aware of the danger of whatever we were doing that was considered illegal. And I wasn't doing anything that other people were not doing. Mm. I got involved through a priest, imagine. Through a priest, I got involved in rescuing people and sometimes hide them in my house and try to get them in an embassy so that they could get out of the country. But many people were doing the same thing. And then there was a point when I realized the danger I was in, and then I got out of the country. Other people stayed and confronted 17 years of dictatorship. I just got out, I escaped.
You got out and you got lucky. Non-negotiables, my dear, non-negotiables. Do you have any non-negotiables in your life?
Honesty. Yeah. I don't want to deal with people who are not straightforward and honest and can talk to the heart and you can trust.
Yeah.
You know, when I met Roger, Roger started writing to me and every day, twice a day. And my assistant was researching about him because she thought that he was a stalker. And my first question was to my assistant, not to him directly, find out if he's an honest guy, because I don't want to deal with anything that is iffy, that you cannot trust. I don't have time for that.
Do you find it that when you meet people, you know?
Not always, because I'm very romantic and I tend to idealize people, especially the men I fall in love with. I create a character. This happened with my second husband, clearly. I fell in lust with this guy that was handsome and seemed like had so many adventures, that he was a self-made man, came from a homeless preacher that was his father. And everything was so like a novel. And so really, and so I wrote a novel called The Infinite Plan, in which I created this bigger than life character that was called Gregory something in the book. And it was really Willie in real life. And it wasn't Willie's life. It wasn't even Willie, but Willie believed that I had portrayed him. And he said, it's not my life really, but it's my emotional life. So he really became the character in his own eyes, but it was my doing. And I believe that for 20 years. And when this idol began to disintegrate, it was so hard for me to accept it that for 8 years in therapy, I really, really tried to make it work. And it was my problem because I had created an illusionary character. So when you ask me that question, I don't always see how people really are. But when I find out that they have betrayed or been dishonest or been cruel, I just don't want to have anything to do with them.
Do you think that you created that person because that's exactly what you needed to go through? Or because you were afraid that if that person, the true person that you created, will come your way, you couldn't be with that person?
Well, that's what happened. That when I saw that I had invented someone, I just, finally we divorced. I mean, at the end we divorced, but it took me many years to really see the depth of the deceit.
Right. That's what a lesson, right? To try to stay truth to ourselves, because the same way that you're saying you want honesty from others, sometimes it's really difficult to have honesty from ourselves.
Has it ever happened to you?
Yeah, I think that there's times where you rather hear the story that you made in your head than the truth that is at your doorstep, and you create that out of survival. You create that until the bubble is burst, and then heartbreak comes along, which is one of the questions that I had for you.
You know, some people just stay in their relationship because they have invested so many years in it, and they just can't get out. And I think in a way that happens to Violeta in the book with Julian. She stays with him much longer than she should have.
And that dependence that Violeta created, do you think that it could have been stopped in any other way than the way it happened, that she actually eventually finds a way out?
I don't know. Probably. But from a literary point of view, I needed something striking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I needed suspense of some kind.
That's
and
right.
So I brought in a character that I love that is called Soraida Abreu. And she is a beauty queen from Ram Boricua. She's Puerto Rican. And she's all curves and seduction. And she's just a power force. I love her.
I love it. In one of the comments that I keep on reading, that people, by the way, they love you, your books, who you are. There's all kinds of love, all kinds of love coming your way, Isabel. You should know that. But one of the things that they want to hear a little more is about heartbreak, and I think that I would like to frame it not only to talk about your dear daughter Paula, but the heartbreak of leaving the country that your heart is, right? You were born in Peru, but really raised, you're Chilean by being raised there and loving that country, and you had to leave it out of fear of not surviving. All that heartbreak that comes with being exiled, losing a child, 2 marriages that don't work. I will never call them failures, by the way. They just didn't work, or they worked for the time that they needed to work.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile heartbreak?
I take it as it comes. It's unavoidable. I mean, you can't go through life and have an interesting life without risk. And risk often means suffering and sorrow. And even if you don't look for it, it will happen. If we live long enough, we end up losing everything, as my mother would say. So I know that's part of my life. I have had a lot of tragedy and a lot of success, a lot of losses and a lot of love. So in a way, everything is compensated, it's balanced. But what is most important, Victoria, and you as a filmmaker, you know that this is true, is the way you tell things. Not to the audience only, but to yourself. When you read a script, when you prepare a movie, when you are creating this production that is huge, you tell yourself what is the story. You narrate to yourself the plot, the characters, the intention, everything. And as I have written a couple of memoirs in my life, and I know that when I write a memoir, I choose the highlights and the lowlights. I don't tell any of the boring stuff in between because who cares? But the way I tell those highlights and those lowlights, I choose the adjectives. I decide what is the tone in which I will tell it. And if I repeat it 3 times, I believe it. So if I tell you that when I was young, I was blonde with long legs, 3 times, I will end up believing it. And probably you too. So, yeah. So that what I'm trying to say is, and I often tell this to my readers who write to me in despair sometimes, I say, okay, let's revise the narrative. Tell me the same story with other adjectives. Let's look at it from another light. Let's look at it from behind the mirror. My mother used to say that one thing is what everybody sees, that's the mirror, but there's a truth behind the mirror. And that's what you have to reach for. There you will find the answers. So when I feel the temptation of getting really furious, which I do often, or terribly sad, or desperate because I see so much suffering in the world and I can't help, then I have to stop and repeat what I have said with other adjectives in another tone and change the narrative in a way that it can become effective, positive, and can help me and others.
Yeah.
I don't dwell in despair.
What do you do with writer's block then?
I don't have writer's block. I had it only once after Paula died. And after Paula died, I wrote a memoir called Paula, and then I couldn't do anything for 3 years. I would come every day to my computer and write, and everything was flat. Everything was dark and gray and stupid and boring because my life and inside me, that's how I felt. Yeah. And then one day I was at Book Passage, my favorite bookstore, where I have like a second home. And Annie Lamott, a beloved writer from the Bay Area, was there. And I told her that I was in a writer's block. And she said, there's no such a thing as a writer's block. You are just empty. Your reservoirs are empty. Get out there, fill them up. And she was absolutely right, fill them up.
And what do you do when, I mean, regardless of the grieving moment that you had to go through, which I have so much respect for what you've gone through and how you pulled yourself from the bootstraps and got out there. And I think there's a lot of people listening today that have had a lot of loss during COVID times that by sheer listening of you and how you overcame that, you're being of great help. But what do you do when you're empty and flat? What does Isabel go do for fun?
Well, I don't have fun. I am not a playful person. I don't go on binges. My binging is the storytelling.
Yeah.
In the case of a writer's block that I had after Paula, I realized, well, 2 things helped. But one thing, the way I filled my reservoirs was getting out of my comfort zone. So I went to India and to Guatemala and just confront other realities and get immersed in the color and the noise of the world instead of being isolated. Because what grief does is you tend to close down. You go inside and you become completely isolated from everybody and everything. That's the worst thing you can do. You have to get out there and connect and be with other people and be in the world. So what I did also is that I remembered that I am a journalist by training. And if I am given a subject and enough time to research, I can write about almost anything. Well, not football probably, but yeah, but I gave myself a subject that would be as removed from grief and sorrow and loss and death as possible. And I wrote about lust and gluttony, a book that is a nonfiction book called Aphrodite. And just researching for the book pulled me out of that state of darkness in which I was. Half of the research was in pawn shops. So you may imagine the fun I had. My mother was visiting and I had to go with my mother who didn't speak much English. And this 70-year-old lady would go with me to the pawn shops and she would put on her glasses and look at these things very closely. And I had to translate the instructions. And in one of the pawn shops, there was a chaise longue, you know, a huge vibrator, really. So you would lie down on this chaise longue and press buttons, and it would vibrate in strategic places. And while I was doing my research, my mother was lying back on the chaise longue with all the buttons on.
She was in heaven.
In heaven. So you can imagine that something like that can pull anybody out of a depression.
And it will shake you out of that depression. That's very funny. Question in your process. My question is about intention versus impact. Do you write and start with the intention of a good story or the impact of a good story?
I don't know. How do you do it?
We never do it with the impact because we never know that we will end up telling a good story. We're always trying to make it better. You know, filmmaking is such a fluid form, and it takes so many people. It takes 5,000-6,000 people to make one of our movies.
Wow.
Because you are your production. You are it. You are. And that's why I'm in awe of 75 million copies, for the love of God. From one brain comes all of that. I don't know if you even understand the statistic that is, but please know it is undone. Nobody has done it before. And I don't know that anyone will do it again. So
going back to your question, when I start my books on January 8th, I am enthusiastic about a story I want to tell, but I don't know how I'm going to tell it. And I never think if it's going to be successful or well received or published or well reviewed. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is the process, the joy of telling the story. That's what I want. And I want to tell it the best I can. And every story has a different way of being told. Like you, with your movies, you can't repeat the formula because the audience knows exactly what you're doing. And then you know also, you don't want to betray your own creativity. So every book needs to be tackled like a new thing in the world that I have never done before. And that's always a challenge, but the result, I have no idea what will happen to the book. Now I can trust that it will be published because I have the same publishers in almost every language, except in the United States, France, and that's it.
Do you ever wake up one morning and go, oh, maybe they won't publish?
No, but I wake up in the morning saying this book is a shitty book. I have to start all over again. Often. Yeah. And I say, what am I doing? And then I come and I read it aloud and it doesn't work. And I have to start again. But I have learned one thing, Victoria, and I'm sure you have learned it too, that if you stick to it, you will do it.
Yeah.
And I never give up. I never give up.
You got to stick to it and tell me what you think about this, but you have to listen to the smart people around you that over the years have not become a yes person to you. The people that actually do have a point of view and they give you the hard truth. I don't know, do you have that in your life? Like those 3 or 4 friends or family or people that work for you that go, okay, tell me what is it? Good, bad, what is it?
I'm beginning to have it now because I write in Spanish. and I live in English, in an English-speaking country. I never had an editor that could read Spanish in the United States or in England or in an English-speaking place. So I couldn't get any feedback in that sense. There is no tradition of real editing as they do in the United States in the Spanish language. You send your book and they publish it or not, but you won't get an editor telling you, I need a sex scene in page 40. No, that doesn't happen. And I don't get feedback in Spanish, but now I can show my books to my brother, whom I adore, and to Johanna Castillo, my agent who reads Spanish. And so I get an aunt, a friend who is a great writer, Elizabeth Suercaso. And those three people give me feedback in Spanish. And I trust their input, but I have to choose because they all have different ideas. Yeah. And so with their ideas, I have to decide what's the final version.
That's it's so true, because if you hear every note at every time from everyone, then you have a very scattered story. That happens to us.
But
too.
If you work with thousands of people, how do you do it?
Listen, it's like chewing an elephant, one bite at a time. You just chew and keep on chewing and keep on spitting and chewing and spitting and chewing.
It must be awful.
No, it's fabulous.
How long does it take between getting a script and deciding that it's the moment to start?
It could take anywhere between 2 and 4 years. So that from the moment that we say that movie is going in the slate to the moment that you see it at a theater, it could be anywhere between 2.5 years to 3 or 4 years. It depends, and now with COVID it's
worse, I imagine.
It's a journey. I want to ask you something, if you don't mind, about what's happening in Chile,
of course,
your country. What do you think about this political new wave that is happening and the potential of a new constitution?
Well, in Chile, in October of 2019, there was what they called estallido, which was an explosion of popular anger. And millions of people went to the streets to protest. No leaders, no agenda, no political party behind it. Actually, the government and all the political parties were caught by surprise. They had no idea. They said publicly that the country was furious. So where were they? In which kind of bubble do they live? And these protests ended up channeling the whole energy into drafting a new constitution, because the country from outside seems to be very progressive and to have a solid economy. The problem is that for people who live in Chile, the distribution of wealth and opportunities is very unfair. And this inequality, which is one of the highest in the world, created that anger. All revolutions start with anger and with frustration at something that is basically unfair. And then the pandemic hit and everything got frozen in time. But under the currents, there was still energy to continue working on the idea of a new constitution, and a few ideas came together. First, gender parity, equal number of women and men everywhere in their decisions, in administration of the country, in private and public sectors. Inclusion, everybody's included. The native peoples, LGBTQ+, everybody is there represented. Diversity, the fact that we are not a homogeneous country, we are diverse, and we have to accept that as part of the constitution. Then climate change, of course, and respect for nature. So all these new things are what young people are worried about. The old politicians don't even think in those terms. They were brought up in another world. And now there is this new world of young people who are worried about these issues and not other issues, these ones. So the idea of creating a constitution that is drafted by 155 people who represent all this diversity in the country is very new. Which country in the world at this point is asking, what kind of country do we want? And how are we going to create the rules and norms for that to happen? No one is doing that. No one can do that at this point. So Chile might be the first one of a trend, and that would be nice. And we have a new president that will be 36 years old when he becomes president. He's 35 right now. And he has a young team, 14 women are the ministers and 10 men. So already that is striking. And they are all young. No, it's not that we have to idealize youth, because experience also matters, you know. But the fact that these young people come with energy and new ideas and represent, they were voted by the young people and by women. 63% of women voted for this government. So I am very hopeful, and I am almost sure that it will not go back on a bad direction like other leftist governments have in Latin America. So I hope that this starts a trend.
It will be a beautiful thing. What a gift to the citizens of a country to say, what kind of people do we want to be, instead of fighting the way that others have decided that we should be?
Yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful question. The question that I think every person in the world, women and men, should ask themselves: what kind of world do we want, and how are we going to get there? Because obviously, we have to replace the patriarchy. This civilization reached its limits. Now it's time for big change, for a real jump in evolution. And that we need to visualize it. We need to dream it. We need to narrate, to talk about it, and then make it happen.
But why do you think people are so afraid of change?
Change always makes people afraid. And then political parties, interest groups play to that fear. For example, in Chile, like in the United States and in Europe right now, and in many countries, the right-wing parties play to the fear of immigration, of insecurity in the streets, or crime, of communism. Communism practically doesn't exist anymore as we understand it. The Cold War is over. It's been over for a long time, but still people are afraid, you know, and people who are interested in keeping things as they are or going back in time, they play to the fear. And so in Chile, this is the slogan, that hope triumphed over fear.
It's very true. Do you have a favorite book of yours?
You know, I am very grateful to the House of the Spirits because it paved the way for all my other books, and to Paula because it connected me to thousands and thousands of people to this day. I mean, not a week goes by, Victoria, that I don't get 2 or 3 letters from people who are connecting because of Paula. They either have a loss, or they have read the book before and they have a loss now and they remember the book, or they have someone that they want to give the book to and they want it autographed because that person has lost a child. And sometimes it isn't that kind of horrible loss. It can be a divorce, or a mother that has Alzheimer's, or things like that, you know, a father that had a stroke. And she writes to me, usually a daughter, not a son, and says, I lost my father. His body is here, but I lost him.
Yeah. What would Paula would have said to Roger?
I would not have asked her. Are you kidding?
Well, I think you should.
No, I didn't ask my son. I just presented the facts.
You just said, here's my new husband and deal with it.
More or less.
Deal with it and enjoy. Next. We are at that time where we have some questions. Would you like to take some questions from the beautiful 917 people from all over the world? You should know that they have been listening, and they have, it's a beautiful thing. So here you go. If you could recommend 3 authors for those of us who love your books and writing style, who would they be?
Oh, that's a very difficult question.
Is it?
It is, because there are so many authors and so many new authors, especially women writing. There are so many writers that I really love that it's very hard for me to recommend only 3 now.
What are 3 principles that have helped you to be so prolific in the last 40 years?
You know, I think that they were instilled in my brain by my grandfather. Don't complain, don't whine. Take care of yourself and others. Trust yourself. Nobody's going to help you. You have to do it yourself.
The little engine that could. I can do it.
Yeah, well, the problem with those principles is that you can become very bitter and not trust anybody. So I have to filter that in order to live in the world with some trust for the world and for people, you know, because this is the story that my grandfather would tell us. And this, he told it many times, and this was supposed to be a morality tale. There once was a man who had an only child, a boy that he adored. And when the boy was 12, he told the child to get up on the balcony on the 2nd floor. And he stood down there on the patio and said, "Jump, my son, your father will receive you." And the child jumped, and the father crossed his arms and let the child crash on the floor and break several bones. What is the morality lesson? Don't trust anybody, not even your father. So go figure. That's how I grew up. I have worked this in therapy, believe me.
I was going to say that. Those are harsh words, my friend. Okay. That's, please, people.
No, but I have to add one thing that has helped me. Maybe not 40 years, not 80 years, but it has helped me since Paula died. My daughter's, she was a psychologist. And at that time, she was living in Madrid, and I was married to Willie, who had 3 addicted children. And I cannot even begin to tell you what addiction does to the victim, but also to the family and everybody around. It was hell. So I would call Paula in despair and say, "Paula, look what's happening," and then go on a rant. Paula would listen carefully, and then she would say, "Mother, what is the most generous thing to do in this case?" And you know what? That mantra never fails. And that is the mantra of my foundation. What is the most generous thing to do? It always works. It really does.
Paula was a very, very amazing soul.
An old soul.
An old soul in such a body.
Since she was little. She was little and she was like that.
Yeah, what a beautiful.
You know, her husband told me, and he has told many people, that Paula always said she was not going to live long. And
she knew that herself?
When they married and they went on a honeymoon in Scotland, I think it was, and she woke up with a nightmare. We don't know what the nightmare was, but she wrote a letter, a goodbye letter, in the stationery of the hotel. And the letter begins as "we, the spirits." So she already sees herself as a spirit. She was 27, 28 years old, recently married, in her honeymoon. Who writes a goodbye letter, a sort of spiritual will in those circumstances? Nobody. But she sort of knew. She sort of knew what was going on. And the letter ends saying, "For as long as you remember me, I will live with you. Don't be sad, because we spirits stay with people who are happy."
What a true statement. My God, I think I'm going to cry. What a true statement that we live with those who are happy as happy spirits. And the fact that your entire life, since the day she died, has been dedicated to the passion for living.
I'm living the life she didn't have time to live.
Yeah,
I'm living for her. So I try to make her mantra mine, and her enthusiasm for life has to be mine too.
What a beautiful gift that you have given her, even though
she gave me.
And that, well, she has given clearly to you and you to her in return, I think, by doing exactly as she saw you could. You have lived through as she saw you could, which is that's the
Let's
gift.
talk about something else, Victoria, because I'm going to cry.
No, we're not going to cry tonight. We're not going to cry. But somebody here wants to know about magic realism.
Magic realism, you know, sorry, just a minute. What was the question? Oh, magic realism.
I could tell you something very funny right now. And before we started this conversation, we talked about your dog always farts and it's very loud. And let me tell you, while we were here, my dog farted and I wanted to tell you. And then I thought, no, shut up. Just we're talking about something rather important. And sure enough, here's my dog making a presence anyway.
Yeah. Well, I have a very little dog. She's this big, but she can clear a room, let me tell you. Really, she can. And I was telling Victoria that when that happens, when we have guests, I always take the blame because I don't want people to think that my dog has no manners. So
your dog has manners and releasing is one of them.
Well, regarding magic realism,
yes,
Latin American literature has been accused of magic realism, but it is the acknowledgement that the world is a very mysterious place, that we don't control many things, that we don't know the explanation of many things. And there are many dimensions of reality, the dimension of spirit, of emotions, of passions. Sometimes we go to war for something that is invisible and impossible to tackle. That's just an emotion, a feeling. That exists in the world. We see the manifestation of that everywhere. And it has become like very present in Latin American literature from the 60s to the 80s, what was called the boom of Latin American literature. But it is not only Latin American. Think of Toni Morrison, think of Maya Angelou, think of many writers of color in this country, of African literature, of Scandinavian sagas. Really, the term magic realism was first used in Germany. And it came to Latin America in a weird way. Alejo Carpentier, a Cuban writer who was living in France at the time of the Surrealists, realized that Surrealism was a very artificial intellectual movement of putting together two ordinary things in an extraordinary or unusual circumstances. For example, the typical example is the umbrella and the sewing machine on the dissecting table. But he realized that in Cuba, you didn't have to put them together. They were there already. So what you had to do is find a language that was rich enough, and it was not a European Spanish language, to express that abundance of extraordinary things that happen in everyday life. And they created this Latin American language that was exuberant, to express exuberant things. Now, the new wave of writers in Latin America abhor of magic realism. And there is one more thing that I need to point out, that there is a difference between magic realism and fantasy. Fantasy has no foundation in reality, no manifestation in reality. The trolls, the aliens, the Harry Potter's invisibility cloak doesn't exist. And we have never seen anything that reflects that possibility. But there are invisible Indians in the Amazon that paint their bodies in the colors of nature and walk so swiftly in the vegetation that they can be a yard away and you don't see them. So that is magic realism. The other is not. The other is fantasy. The cloak is fantasy. Garcia Marquez explained it very beautifully once when he said that he had Remedios, La Bella, rising to heaven in body and soul. And he wrote that scene innumerable times, and it was always awkward. It didn't work because it was totally unbelievable. But then he came up with the idea that Remedios was hanging the sheets to dry, and a wind came and blew her away with the sheets. So the sheets were like the wings. Yeah. With the sheets, it's magic realism. Without the sheets, it's fantasy.
Beautiful. Do you dream in Spanish or English?
I dream in images mostly. And I don't know, sometimes in Spanish, sometimes in English, but mostly images, and a lot of them.
Because I dream in the last conversation, if the last conversation was in whatever language, French, English, Spanish, that's what I dream in.
Well, because you came to this country very young, so English is, I mean, it's half of your brain is in English.
Yeah, still my second language, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But it's whatever I go to, like if I'm watching the television or watching the show and it's in English, I dream in English. If it's in Spanish, it's in Spanish.
Wow, wow. The brain can do extraordinary things.
Isn't it?
You know, I attended a conference where there was a guy talking about the brain, and he was explaining why we dream, because the brain needs to be active constantly. So that's why we recreate in our brain the images that we have seen or gathered during the day.
It's a very active thing that is happening in our heads. Tell me, what is there any morning of January 8th in the last 40 years that you woke up and you said, I'm not doing it today?
No, I never say I'm not doing it, but I have come to do it and I have not been able to do it. Those years that I told you that I couldn't write.
When you have these conversations, other than wanting to sell that beautiful book behind me, Violeta, which I hope that all of you beautiful people go and buy, what do you want people to get from that story?
From Violeta in particular, or any story?
Yeah, no, from Violeta in this particular case.
Nothing. I just want them to be entertained and to take and to visit the 20th century. That was such a fascinating time. That was the time that my mother lived, and because she was born also in 1920, and like Violeta, she lived a very long life. So it's a century of world wars, of the Cold War, of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the atomic bombs, of the Holocaust, of dictatorships and repression and inventions and technology and feminism and workers' rights and United Nations and the Declaration of Human Rights. So a lot of stuff happened in that century. And I loved the idea of telling the highlights that affect, of course, Violeta's life. It's intertwined, what happens out there in the world and what happens to her in her private life. But I was very entertained going through that time. And I hope that especially young people who think that that's as old as the pyramids can, yeah, of course. I mean, you talk about the 1970 and people think it's like the Middle Ages, you know. My grandchildren can't even imagine. They ask me, was there electricity in the world at that time? Really, really. They can't imagine the world without a cellular phone. So take a look at what happened then. And it's a fascinating time. And when we look at the past, we can understand what's happening now and we can project to the future.
Absolutely. And we can learn from some of our mistakes, not a lot of them, but some of them. One of the things that I wanted to leave tonight in letting you know is everyone in the chat has consistently said how inspiring you've been, what a breath of fresh air you are.
Oh, thank you.
How much you bring to their lives, and they're from all over the world. And they have read many of your work from the House of Spirit, a lot of them finishing now, Violeta. So you are being loved and read, and they're paying attention to what you're going to do next. So what would you talk a little bit about what's coming next, or no?
I wrote a book about refugees, and it's finished and it's being translated. so that my American editor can take a look at it, because it's a very American story and I want her input. And then after she reads it and we create a final version of the book, we'll see. And now I started something else, but I can't talk about what I started because it changes so much in the process that I just never talk about whatever is in process.
You have as many projects as we have. What a beautiful thing. You have a writer, a singer-songwriter, Violeta Parra, who wrote a beautiful song.
Do you know it?
Gracias a la vida que me ha dado tanto. And now I can add, gracias a la vida por haberme dado mi conversación con Isabel Allende. What a pleasure to have you in our lives, to have you in this tumultuous time, to have you be such a spirit of fire and light, which is very difficult to be.
Thank you, Victoria. Eres un amor. Que te vaya muy bien. Lamento mucho lo de tu perro.
No.
I'm so sorry about the dog.
Nos hizo reír nuestro perro.
I want to thank you both for a wonderful conversation and for joining us tonight. And thanks to Miami Book Fair, thanks to all our partner bookstores all across the US. This has been a magical evening and we're just really grateful to have been a part of it. So thank you so much. And que viva Violeta.
Thank you. Gracias.
Que viva Violeta. Good luck with you all. And I'm going to see you very soon because I'm going to come and visit you.
Gracias.
Good night, everyone. Good night. Good night.